Hi, I'm the daughter my parents called trash. Just because I married a black man they thought was a nobody. They praised my sister for marrying rich. They told me I was an embarrassment. But what they didn't know was who he really was. And by the time they found out, it was already too late to undo the damage. So before we begin, tell me, what time is it where you are? And have you ever been judged for who you loved? Drop a comment below. I'm listening. I stood there, the soft cotton of the handkerchief pinched between my fingers, the embroidery slightly fraying at the corner. R and M. Hours. Someone had carelessly dropped it. Maybe me, maybe someone else trying to be cruel in quiet ways. But the fact that it was found beside the trash bin, that felt deliberate. Like an exclamation mark at the end of a sentence no one dared say aloud. The air outside the country club was thick and sticky, like a breath you hold too long. Marcus had walked ahead toward the car, his hands in his pockets, shoulders squared but weary. I took a few steps behind him, my heels clicking on the stone path. Neither of us said a word until we reached the vehicle. He opened the passenger side door for me, the same way he always did, still a gentleman, even after what just happened. "You okay?" he asked softly as I settled in. "I'm not sure what that word even means anymore," I replied, folding the handkerchief carefully in my lap like it still held something sacred. The ride home was quiet, not tense, just hollow. Like something had been scooped out of us and left back there on that brunch table between the silver pitchers and the clinking mimosas. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Instead, I counted. The number of times I'd been sat at the kids' table even in my 30s, the birthdays skipped, the business milestones they never asked about, the way Mom had glanced at Marcus like he'd dragged dirt onto the white carpet of her perfect image. I counted how many times I had let it slide, how many times I'd whispered to myself, "They just don't understand yet." But the truth was, they did understand. They just didn't care. By the time we reached the driveway, Marcus was already loosening his tie. Our modest craftsman-style home nestled quietly on the east edge of Atlanta. We'd bought it together 5 years ago. No inheritance, no help, just our own savings and a loan we paid off early. I opened the front door and the scent of lavender hit me. The oil diffuser had timed itself to perfection. How ironic. Everything inside our home ran smoother than any family function I'd ever attended. Marcus headed to the kitchen. "I'll make tea," he offered, like he always did when something stung too deep to bandage with words. I nodded and made my way to the living room, still holding the handkerchief. I placed it down on the coffee table, next to the coaster that read, "Love grows best in little houses." There was a moment, a flicker, where I almost laughed, but it was bitter, sharp. I sat down and opened my laptop. I hadn't planned to do this today, not like this. But something inside me had tilted, cracked open. Maybe it was the way my mother had looked at me when she said, "You married down, dear." As if love were a stock value. As if Marcus, the man who stayed up all night with me through failed startups and sudden layoffs, was less than the plastic charm glued to Callista's fiancé's fake smile. What they didn't know was that Marcus wasn't a janitor. He never had been. That was just the story we let them believe. He owned a janitorial company, 5 contracts across the state, over 60 employees, and a silent partnership in a commercial real estate group that had just closed on a $12 million portfolio. But we never corrected them, because we wanted to see if they ever loved me for me. The answer today had been loud, crystal clear. I opened a folder titled, Estate Holdings, Bundy Ventures. I had helped set that up. Marcus had insisted on listing me as co-owner on everything. We'd built an empire under their noses while they poured mimosas and giggled about my downward choices. He never needed their approval, but somehow I still craved their love, or at least their acknowledgement. A soft clink brought me back. Marcus placed a cup beside me and sat on the armrest. "I'm sorry," he said. Simple, quiet, but with that edge of hurt he tried so hard to hide. I shook my head. "You have nothing to be sorry for." He looked at me for a long time. "Then why do I feel like I'm the reason they keep doing this to you?" I leaned into him, resting my head on his chest. "Because you're the mirror. You show them who they really are." He held me close, one hand rubbing circles on my shoulder. And I thought about that handkerchief. How even love, stitched carefully, could be tossed aside when it didn't fit someone else's narrative. But not mine. Not this time. I held that small linen square all the way home. It sat in my lap like an unanswered question. The city passed by in quiet blurs, storefronts we knew by heart, intersections where we'd once argued over directions, the florist shop where Marcus surprised me with white lilies after my first miscarriage. Back at the house, the familiar click of the front door brought me back to the present. Marcus headed straight for the kitchen, loosened his collar, and asked if I wanted roasted salmon or stir-fry. I said, "Whatever's easy," though neither of us felt like eating. He moved through the motions anyway, calm and careful, as if protecting the last piece of our dignity was something that started with a hot pan and fresh garlic. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind me gently. The room was dim, lit only by the soft amber of a single lamp on the dresser. On the wall was our wedding photo. Just the two of us in front of a courthouse in Savannah. Me in a simple ivory dress, him in his Sunday best. No family standing beside us. Just a gust of wind lifting my veil and his hands around my waist like he knew how fragile that day was. I stared at it for a while, my reflection in the glass barely visible. They said I married beneath me. But what they didn't say, the thing they never asked, was why I chose him. Not once had anyone in my family asked me what he was like when I was sick, or how he'd held me through every rejection letter when my grant proposals were denied. Instead, I got, "Callista's fiancé just bought her a Tesla. Are you two still renting?" And of course, you can't turn a janitor into a gentleman. The thing is, Marcus wasn't even a janitor. That was just the label they slapped on him the day they saw his name tag when he helped clean up after a charity gala. They never asked what he was doing there. Never noticed he didn't answer to anyone, that the warehouse manager reported to him. But I let them think it. Maybe because I wanted to know who they really were without the masks. I sat on the edge of the bed and let my mind drift to years ago, senior year of high school. The auditorium was packed. I had just won the Georgia State Science Symposium, first place for my project on solar nanofiltration. The principal shook my hand, the crowd clapped, and I turned to look for my parents. They were clapping too, but not for me. Callista had made cheer captain that same week, and Mom had brought balloons. "She's got presents," Dad said that night at dinner. "Not all of us are meant for microscopes." Later that same spring, Callista brought home a boy from a powerful family, son of a senator. I remember the way they welcomed him like royalty. When I told them I wanted to go to prom with Aaron, my lab partner, a quiet, brilliant boy who happened to be black, Mom pursed her lips and said, "You're not ready for that kind of trouble, sweetie." I wasn't allowed to go. They never said the word out loud, but I heard it anyway. It wasn't about race, not just race. It was image, status, appearances. That was the God they worshipped, and I was the offering they'd gladly sacrifice to please it. Dinner plates clinked softly in the kitchen. The smell of lemon and rosemary wafted in, warm and comforting. I stood up, walked over to the dresser, and opened my laptop. There it was, a draft blog post I had written months ago, never published. Married to a billionaire, treated like a burden. I clicked it open and scrolled slowly. Paragraph after paragraph laid it all out. Marcus's equity holdings, the private investment firm he'd built from the ground up, the sabbatical he took just to manage operations firsthand, and get his hands dirty. I had written every word with the hope that one day I'd be ready to share it, to pull back the curtain and let the world see who we really were. But that wasn't the point anymore. I didn't need applause. I didn't want headlines. I just wanted to stop asking myself the question, would they still hate me if they knew who he was? And now I had my answer. I scrolled to the bottom of the post, hovered over Publish, and instead clicked Save Draft. Not today. From the hallway, Marcus's voice came soft and steady. "Dinner's ready." I closed the laptop, stood up, and touched the corner of our wedding photo again. "Maybe they'll never see it," I whispered. "But I do. And that's enough, for now." As I stepped into the hallway, the scent of roasted salmon met me again. A warm plate, a familiar chair, and a man who had never needed a title to be my equal. I didn't need revenge. I just needed one more proof that they never saw me. Only what I was worth to them. And wouldn't you know, it showed up 3 mornings later, tucked neatly into our mailbox like a peace offering from someone who'd never said sorry. A thick, cream-colored envelope, heavy with pretense. My name was embossed in gold, first name only, no and guest, no acknowledgement of Marcus. The address label was printed, not handwritten. I paused at the threshold, sunlight brushing the tips of my fingers as I ran them along the edge of the envelope. Maybe this was it. Maybe they finally saw me. Maybe this was some kind of step toward amends. Inside was a flat, glossy card, marble background, rose gold accents, a photo of Callista in a white gown and a man beside her who looked like he practiced smiling in the mirror. Celebrate the union of Callista Winthrop and Sterling Dallard, one of the South's rising stars in tech innovation. There was no note, no call, not even a "hope you can make it." I stood in the foyer for a long moment, card in hand, wondering if I should laugh or scream. Instead, I set it down on the entryway table and went to make tea. That night, my phone rang just after 8. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then, a minute later, she called again. Against my better judgment, I picked up. "Rowena," she said in that airy, performative tone she used for cocktail parties and HOA meetings. "You got the invitation, I hope?" "I did." "Oh, honey, it's going to be spectacular. Sterling just finalized the deal with Rivtech. He's now officially worth 8 figures. Can you believe it? Our little Callista really landed someone with vision." I bit the inside of my cheek, said nothing. She barreled on. "It's going to be at the Foxhall Resort, fully catered, live jazz, and the guest list? Governors, CEOs, even that anchor from Channel 5. No pause. No, how are you? No mention of Marcus. I cleared my throat. Am I expected to attend? Well, she hesitated, barely. It's more of a curated affair, you know? But of course we'd love your support in other ways. Callista really wants it to be elegant. I don't remember hanging up, but I remember the silence that followed. Marcus glanced over from the couch where he was folding laundry, his brows lifting slightly. I shook my head. "Just noise," I said. 2 days later, my phone buzzed again. A text from Callista. "Hey, Mom says a $15K painting from that gallery you like would be perfect. Can you send it to the venue?" No, "Hi." No, "How are you?" Not even a please. I reread it. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't know what stung more, the casual audacity or the fact that they truly believed that was all I was good for. A walking ATM. Last year, she forgot my birthday entirely. I still sent her tulips and a handwritten note that took me 20 minutes to write. I'd picked every word carefully, still hoping, deep down, that I could be seen as more than a placeholder between family milestones. I walked out to the balcony and let the night air hit my face. The city below twinkled like a distant lie, pretty from afar, empty up close. Leaning against the railing, I thought about all the times I'd stepped in when they needed something. When Grandpa's medical bills stacked up, I paid them. When Mom's roof caved in after the storm, I covered the contractors. When Callista wanted her car fixed fast, she didn't call Dad, she called me. But love? Love was always conditional, measured in status, discounted by skin color, bank account, or whether I looked good on paper. I pulled out my phone, opened the Notes app, typed, "Do not send a gift. They gave you their truth. Give them yours." I saved it, closed the screen. Marcus came out to the balcony a few minutes later, setting a warm mug of chamomile next to my elbow. He didn't ask. He didn't need to. I looked over at him. "They invited me, kind of, and they want something from me." He smiled gently. "Of course they do." I didn't reply to the text, but I did start making a plan. I didn't send the painting, but I sent something else. Something they didn't see coming. It started with one quiet call, placed the following Monday morning, just after I'd finished loading the dishwasher and Marcus had stepped out for his morning jog. I stood barefoot on the tile floor, staring out at the soft Atlanta mist curling past the windows, the phone pressed to my ear. "Mr. Felder?" I said. keeping my tone even. "Rowena, always a pleasure," he said warmly. "I was just thinking about the grant renewal for the Morales couple. They've made real progress with the recycled installations." "That's actually why I'm calling," I said, moving to the counter to pour a second cup of coffee. "I want to fund them, fully. No need to wait for the board meeting. Just wire the amount we discussed." There was a pause, the sound of him adjusting something on his desk. "Well, that's incredible. They'll be thrilled." I set the mug down gently. "Also, withdraw the Delphine Gallery's participation in the Winthrop Dallard event." He didn't respond right away. "Rowena," he said carefully, "that's this Friday. They've already—" "I'm aware, but we've always said our gallery doesn't align with performative values. And you once told me your admiration for Marcus wasn't just personal, it was philosophical." There was a beat of quiet on the line. Then he exhaled slowly, and I could hear the faint creak of his leather chair leaning back. "You're right," he said. "I'll call them this afternoon." I ended the call and placed my phone on the counter. Then I finally let myself breathe. By Thursday morning, the ripples had become waves. I didn't need to scroll far to see the quiet unraveling. A whisper of panic had hit the PR circuit. Callista's engagement event had just lost its premier art partner, and with it, their custom collection that was supposed to elevate the evening from ordinary to elite, as one outlet put it. Apparently, someone had tried to replace the pieces with mass-produced floral canvases from a home decor warehouse. It didn't go over well. One tweet read, "From curated to cringe, how the Dallard engagement lost its sparkle overnight." I wasn't tagged, but I saw it. That evening, while I was folding laundry, my phone buzzed again. A message from a journalist I knew casually through an old friend. All it said was this you?" I stared at the screen, then tapped out a single emoji, a closed-lip smile, and sent it. I didn't owe them an explanation, and I certainly wasn't going to give them a headline. Friday came. I had no intention of watching the live stream, but curiosity got the best of me. As I stirred a pot of lentil soup in our small kitchen, Marcus placed his tablet on the counter and opened the feed. The scene was exactly what I expected. A white-draped gazebo, glitzy guests, uncomfortable southern humidity. But something was missing. Art. The blank walls behind the stage screamed louder than any curated design. Just flat space, and a few scattered centerpieces trying too hard. Sterling's mother was caught on a hot mic saying, "This is beneath us." Callista was smiling, but her eyes weren't. I turned the tablet off. Later that night, around 9, my phone rang again. I almost didn't answer, but the name blinking on the screen was predictable. "Mom." I picked up and said nothing. Her voice hissed through the line before I could even exhale. "What did you do?" I took a seat on the edge of the couch, crossing one leg over the other. "Hello to you, too." "Don't play coy with me, Rowena. You pulled your name, your money, whatever you did. It embarrassed all of us. You ruined your sister's special day." I held the phone away for a second, then brought it back. "I didn't ruin anything. I simply chose not to participate. Isn't that what you always wanted?" "You're being spiteful. You're jealous." I almost laughed. "Jealous of what? A performance built on borrowed taste and fake smiles? You've always needed to make everything about you." That part stung. But I didn't let her hear it. I kept my voice calm, deliberate. "Mom, you asked for distance. I'm just honoring it." There was a beat of silence. Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. That night, as the sky dimmed over the city and the hum of summer faded into the background, I stood out on the balcony with a soft fleece blanket around my shoulders. Marcus came out, barefoot, his hair still damp from the shower, and stood beside me. He didn't ask anything. But I was holding something in my hand. A small, velvet box I had once intended to give them, a keepsake I'd designed months ago with an artisan in Santa Fe. A carved sculpture of 2 intertwined trees. One was maple, the other ash, symbolic, of roots, of resilience, of family, even when cracked. I never sent it. I never would. Marcus didn't say anything when he saw me standing there with the small velvet box. He just stepped closer, wrapped his arm around my shoulders, and stood with me under the quiet hum of the night. We didn't need words. Some truths live in silence. 3 days passed. The engagement party faded from headlines. The family chat quieted. But I hadn't. It was raining that morning. Soft, steady drops tapping against the windows of our loft, the kind of rain that muffles sound and slows time. I hadn't gotten out of bed. I didn't feel like I needed to. Or maybe I didn't deserve to move yet. Marcus had placed a fresh cup of coffee on the nightstand beside me, still warm. He hadn't said anything when he brought it in. He just leaned down, pressed a kiss to my temple, and left the room with the same quiet grace he always carried. I lay there, eyes unfocused, watching the ceiling slowly brighten with the muted morning light. The framed photo from our wedding sat on the dresser across from me, just the two of us, holding hands in the garden behind the courthouse, laughing like fools. No grand cake, no matching gowns, no one from my family had shown up, not even a voicemail. I thought time would soften them, I whispered into the room. Time hadn't softened them. It had just made their masks more polished. I reached for my phone, not really sure why. Maybe to check the weather. Maybe to scroll through pictures of the past few weeks to remind myself life had, in fact, been happening. But what I saw instead was a new voice memo from the family group chat, sent by mistake, it seemed. The caption just read, "Update from Dad." I tapped it. At first, just static. Then my father's voice. "She chose to marry below herself. What can I say? She always had poor judgment." He chuckled. Not a kind laugh, more like someone relishing a private punchline. Another voice joined, Callista. "Well, I married right. At least I didn't bring shame." Then silence. I sat up slowly. My body felt like it was made of wet sand. My hand holding the phone trembled. Not because it was unexpected, but because it was so deliberate, so effortless. They didn't think I'd hear it. That was the part that cracked something deep. I almost deleted it. My thumb hovered over the little trash icon. I could have erased it, just like they'd tried to erase pieces of me for decades. But I didn't. Instead, I tapped forward, sent it to my own email, and added a note. Reminder. For when I forget. I even whispered to myself, if I ever think about asking for their love again, play this. I placed the phone face down on the bed and stared at the ceiling. The room was quiet, but I could still hear their voices. Floating, mocking, smug. The kind of disdain that doesn't come from disagreement, but from belief. A belief that I was never enough. That no matter what I achieved, who I loved, what I built, I would always be the daughter who disappointed them simply by existing outside their mold. I got up finally, wrapped myself in Marcus's flannel shirt, and walked barefoot into the living room. The coffee had gone cold. I didn't reheat it. I didn't need it anymore. That afternoon, I cleaned out the hall closet, not because it needed it, but because I needed something to touch, to throw away, something to sort. Tucked in the back was a box I hadn't opened in years, birthday cards, a few old letters, a dried rose from a corsage no one came to see me wear. I tossed most of it. That evening, as rain still drizzled over the city and the fireplace flickered low in the corner, I sat on the rug with the last thing I hadn't thrown away, the wedding invitation. Half of it was already singed. I'd lit the edge months ago during a moment of weakness, but I never let it burn through. I wasn't ready then. Now I stared at the charred corner and the perfectly printed gold lettering. It read, "Together with their families." I let out a breath, steady, calm, and just before the final embers of sunset dipped below the skyline, I leaned forward, fed the invitation to the flames, and watched. No smoke alarm went off. The flames had long since gone out, but the scent of scorched paper lingered faintly as I woke the next morning. The ashes of the wedding invitation still sat in the tray by the fireplace, small gray curls of pretense. I didn't touch them. Instead, I wrapped myself in Marcus's oversized cardigan, padded barefoot into my home office, and opened the laptop. I hadn't been here in a few days, but the inbox hadn't waited. I clicked through a few invoices, a funding proposal, then paused. Subject line, Bridal Registry Gift Launch, Limited Run Preview. The sender? A lifestyle PR firm I knew too well. They'd worked with Callista's startup before. I almost deleted it without opening, but some part of me, curious, bitter, clicked anyway. The body of the email was cheerful and pink and full of exclamation marks. A carousel of images loaded slowly. The fourth one made my chest tighten. It was a home kitchen gadget, simple, sleek, designed to sit neatly on a countertop. A sustainable flour sifter with a dual compartment system and eco-powdered coating. The caption read, "Designed by the Winthrop Studio team, patent pending." But I'd seen it before. I stood slowly, walked over to the hallway closet, and pulled down an old shoebox from the top shelf. Inside, wrapped in brown tissue, sat a prototype, hand-soldered by Marcus 3 years ago in our first apartment. I remember him sanding the edge with a butter knife and joking, "It's functional, but it won't win awards." That was the night we ate cereal for dinner because he'd spent the grocery budget on parts. Back at my desk, I pulled up an archived Google Drive folder, one I'd made without Marcus ever knowing. I had scanned and saved every sketch he drew, every prototype design he'd left on the table while saying, "It's not real yet, don't waste time filing it." But I had filed them, all of them, under the name of an old LLC I'd formed years ago for freelance consulting. Dormant, dusty, but still mine. "You protect the man you love," I whispered, "even from his own optimism." And now, my sister was using it to sell her dream, under her brand, without a hint of acknowledgement. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't even text Marcus. Instead, I pulled out a legal pad, then opened a template from my legal archive folder. I swapped the date, updated the product SKU, and changed the name on the contact line to the Winthrop Collective. Subject, cease and desist, unauthorized use of intellectual property. Beneath the signature line, I added my alias, Clara V. Lorne, Legal Rep, Junestone Holdings LLC. Then I reached for a pale yellow sticky note and scribbled just one line before folding it inside the envelope. "You love the idea. You just didn't know it was ours." I sealed it shut and slid it into my outgoing courier bin, addressed to the firm representing Callista's company. Quiet, clean, without theatrics. I stood at the window for a moment after, watching the clouds shift low across the city skyline. The air felt cooler, cleaner. There would be no press conference, no announcement, just a slow tightening of the noose on their ambition. I started to walk away when my phone buzzed. New email, from Mom. "So excited to be joining Callista's bridal brunch this Sunday. Family only, keeping it classy, can't wait." No mention of me. I wasn't even CC'd. It had been forwarded by accident. Again, no RSVP, no address, just silence, thick as syrup. I let the screen fade to black, walked over to the coat rack, and reached for my blazer. They hadn't invited me, but I wasn't planning to stay home either. I slipped the phone into my coat pocket and buttoned the ivory blazer with steady hands. It was early, the kind of crisp morning where the air felt like truth, cool, sharp, and impossible to ignore. By the time I stepped out of the car in front of the Vineyard estate, the sun had already stretched across the hills, making the vines glisten like they'd been brushed with honey. The bridal brunch was already underway. The event space sprawled across a terraced lawn lined with white tents and cascading flower arrangements. Soft jazz filtered through the air, mingling with laughter and clinking glasses. Everything screamed curated elegance. I wasn't invited, but I came anyway. Inside the main tent, Callista stood mid-toast, a glass of champagne in hand, wearing an ivory dress that looked plucked from a magazine shoot, intentional, pristine, sterile. My entrance didn't go unnoticed. Her voice caught for a second when she saw me near the back. Our mother was seated at a table of executives, all grinning like they'd just closed $1 million deal. The moment she saw me, her expression darkened. "This isn't about you, Rowena," she said, not even trying to lower her voice. My father didn't look up from his mimosa. He just muttered, "I thought we made it clear whose moment this is." Guests turned to look. Some avoided eye contact. A few whispered, tilting their heads. One woman clutched her pearls, not figuratively, literally. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I found an empty spot near the end of the tent, stood with my hands folded in front of me, and listened. Callista recovered quickly, raising her flute again. As I was saying, family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who lifts you up, who reflects your best. And sometimes, you have to make hard choices to protect your peace. A few chuckles, several polite nods, thinly veiled barbs, wrapped in ribbon and resentment. When the servers passed around champagne again, they skipped my side of the tent entirely. I stepped forward to grab a glass from the corner tray, but a young server cut me off. He wasn't rude, just nervous. "I'm sorry, miss," he said, eyes flicking toward Callista. "You're not on the list." I gave him a small, practiced smile. "It's fine. I prefer still water anyway." But the smile didn't hold. I turned on my heel and walked through the side of the tent, following a small stone path that led out into the gardens. A wisteria arch stretched overhead, casting light purple shadows onto the gravel below. I stood there, out of sight, letting the hum of the party fade behind me. That's when I heard footsteps. "Excuse me," a deep voice called out. "Are you Rowena?" I turned. The man was tall, silver-haired, with a calm presence that felt utterly out of place at this circus. He wore a navy suit with no tie, his cuffs unbuttoned, and a leather folder tucked under his arm. "I am." He offered a hand. "Gregory Verne. I believe you're the Rowena who saved our third-quarter expansion last year?" I blinked. "You're Sterling's father?" He gave a small chuckle. "Technically, yes, though we run very different empires. He likes social media metrics. I like factories that don't shut down." I smiled. A real one this time. "I didn't know you'd be here." "Neither did they, from the looks I got." He glanced over his shoulder toward the tent. "But my assistant confirmed it was your LLC that stepped in when our Atlanta distribution center nearly folded. I've wanted to thank you in person." "I just signed the papers. It was Marcus who made the numbers sing." He studied me for a moment, his gaze quiet but sharp. "Do they know who you are?" I gave a soft laugh. "I don't think they've ever cared enough to find out." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe today's a good day to start telling them." I looked down at my empty hands. "I didn't come to make a scene." "Good. Then let me offer a suggestion." He stepped beside me, pulling out his phone. After a few taps, he held it toward me. "Board vote, Monday morning. They've asked for clarity on a new investor block. I've recommended they allow your presence, since, well, you own 12% now." I stared at the screen, trying to breathe through the tightness in my chest. "I didn't ask for power," I said. "No," he replied, smiling gently, "but you earned it anyway." The wind picked up just enough to rattle the leaves around us. I took out my phone, opened my contact list, and typed one message. "Trigger the vote. Monday. I'll be there." Gregory Verne's driver picked me up at 8 o'clock sharp the next morning. I'd barely slept, but you couldn't tell by looking. I wore black, not out of mourning, but clarity. A high-collared dress, clean lines, hair pinned back, no jewelry except a silver band on my right ring finger. Not a wedding ring, a promise to myself. The ride to San Francisco was silent until we crossed the bridge and the skyline came into view. That's when Gregory finally spoke. "Don't blink today," he said. "Even if they beg." I turned to him and nodded once. "I won't." At 9:14, we stepped into the executive floor of Verne Holdings. The hall outside the boardroom buzzed with movement, attorneys, assistants, cameras being discreetly tucked into corners. The press hadn't been invited, but they had arrived anyway, whispering the word, "Vote." Inside the boardroom, every leather chair was filled. The long table gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights, and everything smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood. At the head of the table sat Sterling Dallard, a tempting confidence, and beside him, my sister. Callista looked like a statue, flawless on the surface but fragile at the base. Her dress was cream silk, her hair was curled into perfect waves, and her lips were tight. She didn't expect me, not like this. Gregory motioned to a seat beside him. I walked to it, slowly, deliberately, and sat. A hush swept the room like the first gust of wind before a storm. "Before we begin," Gregory said, standing with both palms on the table, "I'd like to formally introduce the voting co-chair for today's session, Miss Rowena Hartley." Callista's eyes widened. Her champagne-colored nail polish cracked visibly as she gripped her clutch. Her voice broke through the silence. What is she doing here?" Gregory remained calm. Your engagement involved a proposed equity shift across the Nevada portfolio. Per the trust charter, that requires unanimous family vote. And since Rowena is listed as co-trustee of that entity, you're lying, Callista snapped. She's not even part of this family. She is, Gregory cut in. On record, and on paper. I slid a thin folder toward the center of the table. Clause 12B, page 4, my signature, filed 3 years ago under the dormant Hartley Foundation. I reactivated it last week. My father, seated at the far end, paled. Rowena, you wouldn't do this. I didn't raise my voice. I already did. The room held its breath. Sterling leaned forward, clearly confused. Wait, this means... It means, Gregory said, that without Rowena's vote, your engagement package has no access to equity shares in the Nevada and Florida holdings. The silence cracked open. Callista stood abruptly. She's bitter. She's always been petty. She's sabotaging my future because she couldn't build one of her own. I stared at her, really stared. You stole my husband's designs. You mocked our marriage. You erased my name from your registry but asked for my money. And now you're angry I finally said no? Callista's mother, our mother, tried to interject. This is not the place. This is exactly the place, Gregory said. The board accepts Miss Rowena Hartley's vote to revoke Callista Winthrop's temporary engagement clause, effective immediately. The gavel fell, literally. Then the doors opened. The press flooded in like floodwaters breaking a levee. Microphones, flashbulbs, questions shouted. Faces I didn't recognize shouting words like power move, family implosion, and silent partner no more. Callista turned to me, trembling. You ruined everything. I stood, straightened my dress, and looked her in the eye. No, you did that the day you decided you didn't need me. She lunged forward like she might say something else, but Gregory stepped between us. There's nothing left to say. I walked out, cameras flashing, heads turning. My steps were measured, my face unreadable. But inside, everything shook. Not from fear, not even from pride, from the weight of finality. This wasn't triumph, it was truth. Undeniable, raw, and overdue. It had rained the night before, the kind of slow, persistent rain that doesn't demand attention, but soaks everything in quiet. By Sunday afternoon, the sky over the hills had cleared, but the air still held that soft scent of wet soil and eucalyptus. I opened the windows to let it in. The house was silent. Not the hollow kind of silence that comes after a fight or a departure. This was different. Weighted, but not heavy. A stillness earned. I walked slowly through the foyer and into the back hallway, where Grandpa's old study had remained untouched since the day I moved in. I hadn't had the heart to redecorate it. The faint smell of lemon oil and old paper still lingered. The shelves were, as he left them, meticulously kept, his books in alphabetical order, magnifying glasses still tucked inside the gardening encyclopedias. The envelope was exactly where I had left it, on the corner of the writing desk, just beneath the brass lamp with the crack in its shade. I'd passed it every day this week. Sometimes I'd glance at it. Once I'd picked it up, then put it right back down. But today I sat. I took a breath, slipped my finger under the flap, and gently pulled it open. Inside was a single photograph, aged just slightly at the corners. It was me, maybe 6 or 7 years old, sitting cross-legged in Grandpa's greenhouse, surrounded by little pots of budding lilac. My cheeks were dirt-smudged. My smile was wide. He was kneeling beside me, one hand on my shoulder, the other holding a watering can tilted just so. Pressed flat behind the photo was a lilac bloom, dried but intact, and beneath it, a note card in his handwriting. I would have known those neat block letters anywhere. Even if they never see you, I always did. I didn't cry right away. I sat with it first, let it settle into my bones, let it speak into the space that no amount of boardroom votes or headlines could reach. But eventually, the tears came. Not hot or frantic, but soft, relieved. Someone had seen me, not for what I could do, not for who I married, not for the money I didn't give or the party I didn't attend. He saw me, as I was, as I am. The light shifted as the sun began to dip westward. I stood, wiped my face, and placed the photo gently back into the envelope. Then I picked up my keys and walked out. The drive to my gallery was short, 15 minutes of winding streets and stop signs. The small, modest storefront had been mine for 3 years now. I never talked about it. Not with family, certainly not with Callista. But it had grown, quietly, steadily, like the plants Grandpa used to tend. Inside, the walls were still mostly bare. I hadn't hosted a show since last fall, but today I brought something personal. I chose the center wall, the one directly across from the front window, hung the photo in a matte black frame with a small brass plate below it, the kind Callista once mocked me for using. "You hang stuff like that, and people think it's a thrift store," she laughed. "At least try to look like you belong in this world." I stood back and smiled. The plate read, "Legacy is earned, not given." As I adjusted the frame, a quiet voice behind me spoke. "Miss Hartley?" I turned. It was Erin, the summer intern I'd taken on months ago. She was clutching a folder of flyers, eyes wide with curiosity. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. She looked down for a second, then back up. "How did you survive all that?" I held her gaze, thought about all the ways I could answer. The lawyers, the late nights, the therapy, the silence. But what I said was simple. "I stopped asking why they didn't love me," I said. "And I started loving myself." Erin nodded slowly, then walked back toward the office to finish sorting prints. I stayed a moment longer in front of the frame. That picture, one no one else had seen, now hung where anyone walking by could. And not because I needed to prove anything, but because I finally didn't. I didn't win by breaking them. I didn't win by becoming louder or richer or crueler. I won by refusing to become them,